My name is Richard Saudek. I have a checkered past, which you all are familiar with, so I won't bother with it. However, in my present incarnation, I'm a lawyer who represents a lot of towns in their discussions with renewable energy developers. I've represented Sheffield, Lowell, Reedsboro, Searsburg, Benson, New Haven. Done some work with Derby, and I gave a couple of talks in Wyndham about what goes into agreements between towns and developers. So I guess I've covered most of the towns that have these developments of any size, anyway. And I feel I've learned a few things about this. One is I've come to feel that towns are the best judges of the impacts of these developments on the towns. They have a good feel for what can be done and what can't be done. They have a good feel for location of these developments, size of these developments, and so on. I believe that one size does not fit all. The legislature has sent over, the requirement that a uniform system of sound, for instance, be devised by the Public Service Board, Public Service Department. I think that the sound of renewable energy projects in a town over which we will soon have F-35s flying, or in a town like Williston with a lot of traffic and the nearby interstate and so on, is very different when you're dealing in 5, 10 decibel increments. It's very different from a quiet rural setting. In any number of small towns, many of which would be hosts to these, and I think it's a mistake to have that kind of uniformity that is in Section 12 of Act 174. I think it's the ambient sound that matters, and I think the townspeople would agree it was the ambient sound, and frankly, I think pretty much any regulator would agree if
So I don't want to move us into a policy discussion on anyone specific in one specific
well, I'm
area.
using it as an illustration.
Okay.
So maybe I'll get off it right now.
Yeah.
As things stand now, towns have virtually no say in the Section 248, in Section 248 renewable energy siting. Therefore, when you represent the town, you're usually dealing with people from out of state, out of country, sometimes almost out of mind. I mean, in their size. The largest hedge fund in the world comes into Vermont. We've made it so acceptable for renewable energy projects that some of the biggest companies in the world are here. Certainly some of the biggest companies in New England are here. And you're sitting on the other side, and you represent the town, and you want to do the best you can for the town. And so what do? Well, between us, you bluff. You basically say, you don't want to even think about going to the Public Service Board without the support of this town. But the fact is that they can come in here without the support of the town. They can come in here with the opposition of the town unless, of course, they've committed and signed something saying that they won't do it without the support of the town. But let's assume that they don't have the support of the town and they haven't said that. They can walk in here and the town will have virtually no say in that process. Now, Section 248 has basically become so weighted down over the years, and this even precedes Tony in the legislature. I mean, this is
it's not just my fault.
It's not just your fault. I'd be happy tell you the extent to which it is, but let's not bother that right now. The 248, you know, only a tax lawyer or a municipal bond lawyer could really parse that statute now, with all its cross-references and so on. I think it really needs a complete overhaul. Every 2 years, we have a new biennium, and I would recommend you taking a look at the legislators who are continuing.
Can I ask it, may I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that, if we didn't have this in the last 10 years, or however many years we've seen the rapid development of solar, for example, would you still be saying that? Does that apply anyway?
I think that would probably apply.
Okay.
Yeah, it's become
Okay.
a tremendous burden, I think.
So it's not just because of the land use issues.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand.
My colleagues at the bar are doing quite nicely on it, because of course it takes a lot of legal analysis. And so, unfortunately, I represent the town, so I take as much advantage of that. Specifically, I would hope that the mechanism be put in place where a town, where a renewable energy facility is being sited, have the ability to recommend specific characteristics, including things like sound standards, construction practices, infrastructure, roads, et cetera, scale of the project, even payments to the town. And that those recommendations have the so-called substantial deference that the legislature has given to a much more general situation where the town has put conservation measures and policies in regional and municipal plans. In other words, well, maybe I should just go back for a second to the upper left-hand corner. I mean, my feeling is that not only are towns the best judges of these things, but also I think I feel very strongly that when projects are being built in Vermont that are going to be either exclusively or partially for out-of-state consumption, which is to say the last 1,400 megawatts of the two cables under Lake Champlain, 1,400 megawatts, 40% more than our peak load, is being we're just a conduit. And we pat ourselves on the back by being, because we're a conduit for renewable energy. Well, you know, that is worth, a pat on the back. And not a heck of a lot more. And I do think that there should be, the towns that cite these things should be able and have the clout and the power to be able to bargain with these people. And if it means taking a toll, it means taking a toll. If it means taking money, it means taking money. If it means, all these other aspects.
Didn't New Haven just do that? With the substation?
1.4 million a year for 40 years.
That was a negotiated agreement. It wasn't something.
Plus a new town garage, a new fire station,
Yeah.
some toys for the boys.
It's a pretty good aspirin.
Have you been to New Haven?
Plus, but that's the money end of it.
Right.
We also negotiated on sound, we also negotiated on screening, and so on. And we were lucky that the wires were going in and out underground. We're not too lucky that they're perpendicularly crossing the famous Vermont gas pipeline and underground 345. But I'm a little concerned that they want to blow New Haven to kingdom come. But it's
They're probably separated by something.
dirt, I guess, yeah. Anyway, They've assured us that they will be built to engineering standards. At any rate, so, yeah, we got some stuff, and they felt that they had to deal with the town. They felt they had to have a vote of the town before they went ahead, and that turned out to be our clout, and we circulated a term sheet and explained a term sheet in the town, and then we had a vote and went on. But that's not, it's not as prominent as, for instance, a big wind array. It's a huge building in one field off Route 7. So at any rate, I think that while the standard of substantial deference in the way it is set out in the law is good, particularly as the way it's defined. It's like a strong presumption which you have to rebut. But I think it shouldn't be just apply to land conservation and so on. This all comes back to the job that I've been doing over the last few years as a lawyer, and that is having the authority with the developer to be able to say no to the developer, and to say, if you don't like it, if you don't like what we're asking, it's a crapshoot, go ahead. Be my,
And
my
if I
day.
can paraphrase, having the credibility with the developer that
Right.
you will go before
Right.
the board,
And
and
that's
you
what-
will have an influence. before
And
the
as a
board.
practical matter, that puts a considerable, I think, a considerable authority in the town's hands. I mean, you get down to the specifics of these things, roads. People don't think about, until they've really focused on wind projects, like that would, they don't think about the kind of roads that have to go up there just to get those babies up the hill. They don't, it's just, the specifics of these projects are substantial. And they make a substantial difference in the towns. I don't have anything else. Thank you. Questions?
So, yes, you're saying now towns virtually have no say. Is there anything in Act 174 that will adjust that or make that less so?
They try to adjust it a little bit in Act 174 by saying that if a town has a municipal and regional plan that has substantial deference, must be given substantial deference. But to me, that's a very small part of the picture. I think you have to get into the specifics. And I'm worried that if the towns can't do that, and if they really think these things are going to wreck their town or to really hurt their town, I think the developer can say, sure, okay, well, we're spending, a few $100,000 just to get this through the regulatory process. Be our guest. You can come in and hire your own experts, your own lawyer, and so on. Which, of course, spending it on lawyers is a good way to spend your money, but it's not always what the towns feel.
So, what I'm hearing you say, and I understand that we moved a little bit away from the participation in Public Service Board, although very much related, and no question about that. But am I hearing you say that you think that the towns should have the authority to write zoning ordinances related to these types of projects?
Yeah, I think the towns should be able to take specific stances, though, on the, I think the whole business of zoning ordinances and so on, I'm skeptical as to whether that will always get at specific projects and the specifics of the projects. which are major undertakings in these towns. They're not, they will define a town. Sheffield is not defined by it's the fact that it has wind machines. That was a good deal.
So I thought.
Yeah, so, but that's what I was gonna ask you about. Sheffield and Lowell, the towns supported those two projects. You negotiated for Sheffield?
Yeah,
So why,
negotiate both of them.
what's different about that than what you did with the substation?
Well, nothing really. I mean, in all cases, in all the cases that I cited, I wound up, the town wound up supporting it. And the town, in most cases, was kind of inclined to support it. Now you've got a situation in Wyndham, for instance, where there is enormous resistance to wind projects. If Wyndham were able to and inclined to get into serious negotiations with the developer,
So, you know
I don't know what would happen, but
Dick, I don't mean to interrupt,
Yeah.
but one of the things that we said at the beginning of the meeting is that we were not going to discuss any cases that were before the board or coming before the board.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So, I'm sorry, we should have restated that when we started in again.
yeah.
If there's any consolation, Dick, I wasn't well behaved either on that.
Yeah, so both of you,
Yeah.
okay.
That does help.
Yeah, there you go. Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So
Okay.
one of the things about this, and you know I have been supportive of, and in fact sponsored before the legislation occurred, the pilot projects with the regional planning commissions, because I thought this was so important to actually be able to do the regional planning and then ultimately the municipal planning to support figuring out how to constructively deal with these projects as they become, frankly, more like land use and less like typical generation projects. Do you feel like your hand has been strengthened or weakened by any of that? Or do you feel like it's irrelevant? In other words, as you represent a town like New Haven, is it just expected that the town is going to have a say in that in terms of the local aspects of it that you can negotiate?
I think it probably helps some, but I think it doesn't go far enough when you're on the other side of the table from these guys.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I want to ask one thing about one size fits all. Earlier you mentioned that implying that the situation is different everywhere. And so are you saying then just by extension in terms of, for example, Senator Lyons brought up zoning. Zoning applies blanketly everywhere, whereas some of the examples you used were more reactions to specific proposals.
My own feeling about zoning is that it's so difficult to foresee when you're writing a zoning plan, and the degree to which those plans have teeth is I think, somewhat questionable, but it's so difficult to foresee that, if you happen to live in, say, Shalat, near a zoning plan, and son of a gun, somebody wants to put a windmill up there and you haven't thought about it.
Whereas
of course,
ease
they
of
wouldn't want to
participation is
allow-
about specific projects and that department having input on.
It's what they come down to, is what the towns look at, is the specific, or the case, their cases, case specific.
Right.
And I realize that that's a little difficult to translate into a general statute, but I would hope that the legislature would give it a try, and I would hope the PSB, as it kind of looks at these cases, would understand the local impact of these things and take it strongly into account.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.